I feel like I've been over this topic ad nauseum, but this is what God's raising inside of me to speak about right now. So this is what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the relationship between the West, the United States, and Israel. Because I continuously hear people talk about and ask the question, why is it that Western Europe and the United States give carte blanche permission to Israel to do whatever they want? And why is it that they not only give permission, but they give their support, they give their money and their armaments? And everyone keeps trying to answer this question based on the authority of politics, and that's never going to give them an answer. The only way that you're going to answer the questions of what's going on right now is through Scripture. So we're going to answer this question from a biblical perspective, which is the only perspective, because the only one who's in control is not politics, it's God. In Revelation 13, John sees a beast coming out of the sea. It has 10 horns, 7 heads, 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. This is the Antichrist. It represents the Antichrist. Every time that you see the Antichrist, this is what you're going to see. As a beast, this is what you're going to see, at least in Revelation. So it has 10 horns and 7 heads and 10 crowns on its horns. The 10 horns are the 10 Germanic tribes that became Western Europe. And the 10 crowns are just representing authority that these 10 kingdoms have. Authority just means power. Okay, so we're talking about Western Europe. We're talking about the 10 Germanic tribes that became Western Europe that has authority for this given period of time. This beast also has 7 heads. And on each head, it has a blasphemous name. So God is not happy with these 7 heads. The 7 heads are 7 kings or kingdoms. And in Daniel 2, we learn that they start with Babylon. So all you got to do is count down. Babylon fell to Medo-Persia. Medo-Persia fell to Greece. Greece fell to pagan Rome. Pagan Rome fell to papal Rome. Those are 5 kingdoms. The reason I pause here is because the 5th kingdom is what started the Antichrist kingdom of counterfeit Christianity. And this is the kingdom that we're told in Daniel 2, when that rock not cut out by human hands is going to be thrown, it's going to be thrown to this 5th kingdom, and all of the kingdoms are going to come crashing down. In Revelation 17, we learn that there's more than 5 kingdoms. There's actually 8. And the 8th kingdom is one of the 7, and is in fact the 5th kingdom. And it's going to fall, and then it's going to rise again as the 8th kingdom. This is the kingdom of the Antichrist. This is counterfeit Christianity. Starts out with Catholicism. It has prostitutes that bore out of her, we come to learn in Revelation 17:5. And it also has an image that was set up by the false prophet, which is the 7th kingdom of the United States. How do we know it's the 7th kingdom of the United States? Well, let's count them down. So we have Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, pagan Rome, papal Rome. That's the Antichrist. Antichrist falls to the 6th kingdom of atheistic communism with Napoleon. Napoleon's not going to testify to it, or communism isn't going to testify to it, because why? Because it took it down. That's kind of a weird relationship. Like, I'm going to take you down and then I'm going to testify to you later. No. So we can rule out kingdom number 6, and obviously we can rule out the 4 preceding kingdoms. The next kingdom is the United States. The United States took down communism. That was during the Reagan era, and he did so with the help of Pope John Paul II. So already you're seeing the false prophet of the United States and the Antichrist kingdom joining together in their agenda. So the United States being the 7th kingdom, and then what did we say? The 8th kingdom is one of the 7, and is in fact, we know, the 5th kingdom. So 1 through 4 came before 5. 6 isn't going to testify because that's what brought it down. The 8th is the same kingdom. It's not going to testify to itself. The 7th kingdom is the false prophet. So now let's review. In this Antichrist kingdom, there are 10 horns, which we're told in Revelation 17 are also 10 kings. These are the 10 Germanic tribes that became Western Europe that bore out of the 4th kingdom of pagan Rome. We learn that in Daniel 7. There is a false prophet. And in Revelation 13, we learn that the false prophet has two purposes. One is to testify to the Antichrist, and the other is to set up the image of the Antichrist. Okay, so now let's review the players. We have the Antichrist kingdom that started counterfeit Christianity, that began with Catholicism. She has prostitute daughters that bore out of her. She also has a false prophet that testifies to her, and she has an image that everyone in the end is required to bow down and worship and receive its mark or die. And that image, we're told in Revelation 13, is created by the false prophet of the United States. It is given breath by the false prophet of the United States. We are also told in Revelation 17 that the false prophet of the United States, the seventh kingdom, and the 10 kings, Western Europe, will remain for a little while. And that there is one purpose to Western Europe, and the one purpose of Western Europe is to hand over their power and authority to the beast. Well, the image is actually the one exercising persecuting power in the end on behalf of the Antichrist. How do we know that? Because Revelation 13 verse 15 says, the second beast, which we're talking about, this is the false prophet. The second beast, the false prophet, was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast so that the image could speak and cause all who refuse to worship the image to be killed. Who's doing this? The image is. It forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or their foreheads so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. It is the image of the beast that is causing people to be killed. Now let's talk about what you're seeing in the world right now. Does the false prophet testify to the image of the beast? What is the image of the beast? What is the image that was created by the United States, the false prophet, given breath? What is it that they're testifying to? And what is it that counterfeit Christianity worships? They worship a group of Jews in the Middle East that they call Israel. And actually, they are quite confused because a land is not called Israel. And Israel, the nation, which is a spiritual nation of people who are circumcised in heart and are God's people, are scattered throughout the nations. They are not just in one nation. Israel always referred to those who were descended from Israel. That was prior to them having any land at all. They were in captivity to the Egyptians for 400 years. Then they went through the wilderness and roamed the land, didn't have any land that belonged to them, but they were promised that they would be brought into the land. And before they were even brought into the land, Moses was told by God that these people are going to prostitute themselves pretty soon when they enter the land, and I'm going to drive them from the land. And he taught Moses a song to teach the Israelites to prophesy that they were going to prostitute themselves and he would drive them from the land. For 23 years, Jeremiah prophesied that if Israel, the people who had land that was the land of Israel, the land was not called Israel. The land was called Canaan, Jericho. The land was never called Israel, guys. That is a fabrication of counterfeit Christianity and the false prophet in order to confuse you. Jeremiah prophesied for 23 years, if you guys don't stop doing what you're doing, you're going to be driven from this land. And 23 years later, Babylon laid siege to Jerusalem, and Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the land and took the people captive. From that point on, it was understood that the land, which actually points forward to spiritual land, will not be restored. They will not inhabit the land. We will not inhabit the land. We, Israel, until the Messiah returns. For this reason, in the book of Acts, the very first chapter, the apostles asked Jesus when he returned and was visiting them over a period of 40 days after having been glorified, are you now going to restore the kingdom to Israel? You don't restore a kingdom to land. You would restore a kingdom to people. And Jesus said it's not for you to know the times and dates the Father has set by his own authority. The understanding, the reason they were asking him this question is because they knew that the Messiah was the one who was going to restore the kingdom to Israel. Who was ruling at the time? Pagan Rome was ruling at the time. Papal Rome was soon to be established. And ever since this time in which Papal Rome was established, there has been confusion, truth has been thrown down, people have been attending churches, whatever that is. In John 4, Christ said to the Samaritan woman at the well, you're not going to worship at the temple, you're not going to worship in Jerusalem. You're going to worship in the spirit and in truth. The way that God truly desires, true worshipers must worship in the spirit and in truth. So that includes cathedrals, temples, synagogues. I don't care what you're talking about. Any kind of organized marketplace that calls themselves God's church, that actually has turned him into a business, has nothing to do with God, except for the fact that God will throw them into the lake of burning sulfur. Early Christians were being slaughtered. Paul talked about it. They were being sawed in half and fed to wild animals. They were not getting dressed in their Sunday best, whatever Sunday is, because it's not in the Bible, and neither is Saturday. Going to some counterfeit church with an image of a cross, singing songs of self-worship and absolute abomination about how God just follows them around all day, fulfilling their honey-do list. They weren't doing that. They were hiding because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who were handing them over to the Romans to be killed. When counterfeit Christianity was established, it suddenly became popular and legal to be Christian because what they were becoming was not Christian at all. If the world loves you, it's because you belong to it. So let's talk about the image. This image that counterfeit Christianity worships through organizations like Christians United for Israel and that liar John Hagee, or the liar Jonathan Cahn and Robert Jeffress, these people lead you to worship that image. Israel started out as those who were descended from Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. In the fulfillment of this, when salvation was extended to the Gentiles, Paul said, not all who are descended from Israel are Israel. Some of them are, some of them aren't. The criteria is circumcision of the heart. And that is also the criteria for being a Jew. That is also the criteria for being Abraham's children. Even Jesus said to Jews who were claiming to be Abraham's children, he said, I know that you're descended from Abraham, and yet you don't do what Abraham did. So you're not his children, you are children of the devil. You either believe in what the actual word says, or you rely on your own understanding and you follow what the Antichrist is teaching right now. But that came straight from the mouth of Jesus to people who were descended. He knew that they were descended from Abraham, and yet he called them children of the devil. The criteria for being Israel, for being a Jew, for being Zion, for being Abraham's children is circumcision. It has always been circumcision since God extended that covenant to Abraham. The physical representation of circumcision was to help you to understand the circumcision of the heart from the sinful flesh. So if not all who are descended from Israel are Israel, and the criteria for being Israel is circumcision of the heart from the sinful flesh and obeying God's law, being moved to obey his law. That's the covenant that God said. He said, I'm going to remove your heart of stone. I'm going to place in you a heart of flesh, a softened heart. I'm going to put my spirit in you, and I'm going to move you to follow my laws and keep my decrees. If a group of people are sodomizing, raping, stealing, and murdering, is that the fruit of being in the covenant? Is that the fruit of being Israel, which is defined as being in the covenant of circumcision through circumcision of the heart and obedience to God's laws? Okay, so we've established that it's a counterfeit, huh? And it just so happens that that counterfeit is doing the very thing that it's going to do to true Christians for not worshiping it and not receiving its mark, which is its ideology in their hearts. It is astounding to me that anyone would not be, that anyone calling themselves Christian could not see, because pagans can see this. Pagans look at this, and God says it. He says, that these nations are shocked by your lewd conduct. You haven't even conformed to the nations around you. That's pretty bad. It is astounding to me that those calling themselves Christian, claiming to know the word, claiming to know the truth and be in the covenant, cannot see that what they are not only supporting but are bowing down to worship is totally against Christ, is totally anti-Christ. Oppression, murder, sodomy, rape, and stealing. That's what you think are the chosen people? That is the most ignoramus thing I've ever heard, I think. Sometimes I say that as a manner of speech. I think I'm actually being for real right now. It is completely ignoramus. How could anyone think that this has anything to do with Jesus? And as though it's not enough for Paul to say, they're loved on account of the patriarchs, but as far as the gospel is concerned, they're enemies for our sake. Why, then, would these groups calling themselves Christians worship this group of people and join gospels with them? Because they are anti-Christ. Do you understand the kingdom? This is anti-Christ. Do you understand what God says about people who have rejected truth, so he rejects them as his priests? People who reject knowledge and are lovers of falsehood, who are going to be destroyed. Because this is obvious to pagans, and the reason it's not obvious to counterfeit Christianity is because they have been shaved. They have been shaved off of Jerusalem, this spiritual nation that belongs to God, that will be the bride of Christ. They've been shaved off. And how have they been shaved off? The book of Isaiah tells us they have been hardened. They cannot see, hear, or understand. And Paul tells us that they have been handed over to delusion because they did not love truth. They were given an opportunity to love truth, and they chose to love falsehood. So what is this relationship between Western Europe, the United States, and the image? And the reason I'm saying this is because I can't tell you how many times I hear this, but yet no one will listen to the answer. I hear the question all the time, why? Why is the West and the United States in the name of imperialism? It's imperialism, it's imperialism. That might be true, but if you don't know what God's doing and you don't recognize the times, you're going to handle it in a completely false kind of way. You're going to keep standing there, baffled at why the West and the United States are supporting this image of the Antichrist. You're not going to understand what God is doing. And to be honest, that's the only thing that matters, because I don't care whether you vote for Kamala Harris or Trump or you vote for, Bernie Sanders. It doesn't matter. No one's going to stop what God's doing, guys. God is fulfilling, and that's the only thing that matters. And you're told that you need to recognize the times so that you will know what you need to do. Jesus rebuked the hypocrites for knowing when it was going to rain, but not understanding the times of the Messiah being here. Don't be a hypocrite. You, as a Christian, need to know the times. The reason why you're looking at this and you're like, this is bananas. Why is the West and America giving blank check support, even to their own demise? Why are they supporting Israel? Why are they giving their money and their armaments to Israel? Because this is the image they worship, and because the one purpose of those 10 kings that became Western Europe is to hand over their power and authority to the Antichrist. And the image of the Antichrist is part of the Antichrist. The two purposes of the United States, the false prophet, are to testify to the Antichrist and to set up the image and give it the power that it has. Now let's discern the times, guys, shall we? You already see, you know that the image of the Antichrist is going to kill all those who will not worship it and require them to receive its mark, its ideology in their hearts. You're going to be justified by your heart, not a chip or a tattoo or something coming from the outside. It's coming from your heart. Jesus made that abundantly clear. Is the image of the Antichrist doing that now to people who won't submit to it and say, okay, yes, we'll leave our homes? Is there legislation being put in place where people cannot speak in favor of any of the enemies of this so-called counterfeit Israel and cannot criticize what they're doing, or they're going to be killed or jailed, even to the extent that journalists who have both free speech and freedom of press are now sitting in jail? And one of them was potentially facing the death penalty, Jeremy Lafredo. You should be able to see this knocking at the door. I've told you that the Antichrist will rise in less than a year. Do you see that the false prophet of the United States has indeed set up this image, continues to testify to it, is raising our United States military in this ideology of the Antichrist through Christian nationalism and Christian Zionism. Yes, that also is happening. Do you also see that the West has handed over its power and authority to the Antichrist? If you can see these things, then you should understand that the things that I'm saying about, that are going to happen within the next year will indeed happen. The witnesses are here. They're here to warn you. If you don't heed the warning, you will go into the lake of burning sulfur. The witnesses will die in less than a year. That will represent the triumph, the second criteria that is required in Revelation 12. The first is the blood of the Lamb. The second is the testimony of the witnesses in order for Satan to be thrown out of the heavenly realms. When he's thrown out of the heavenly realms, he has lost his place in the heavenly realms. He goes down to the earth and he will pursue you. That will begin the Antichrist reign. He will kill the witnesses and he will pursue you. If you're wondering, well, I don't know. Are these the times? What are the things that I just said to you, that I just explained to you, need to happen in order for the Antichrist to rise? Western Europe needs to give its power and authority over to the Antichrist. Check. The United States, the false prophet of the United States, needs to testify to the Antichrist. Check. The false prophet of the United States needs to set up the image of the Antichrist. Check. The image of the Antichrist will be persecuting and killing God's people. Well, it hasn't happened yet, but there is a sign that is happening right now that you should be able to recognize in what they're doing to Palestinians and Gazans. And now the Lebanese. Are we there yet? Here's what you need to know. After the fifth trumpet blows, when the witnesses have been killed, a plague is going to go out that represents the first woe, and it is going to affect all who do not have the seal of God. Something has already been decided. And when you read Revelation 9, you will also see that these plagues, plural, in the fifth trumpet and the sixth trumpet, those affected by those plagues do not return. They do not repent. No one returns after the fifth trumpet. You need to return now. If you do not return now, you will be one who receives that mark of the beast, worships the image, and you will not have any other chance to be saved. You will go into the lake of burning sulfur. The smoke of your torment will rise forever and ever and ever. Please discern this message with God.